You know what I was actually thinking about right before we started going live was that you are to best ball volume at this point, like what I am to dynasty volume as far as like the number of leagues in. And, we're going to talk about all the dynasty leagues that we're in together and dynasty strategy. But I'm just curious, how many best ball drafts are you going to do in an average offseason?
Oh my goodness. It's last year I probably did about 600 or so. I'm already about 50 deep now on the two main underdog contests, the big board, which was their main single QB pre-draft contest, which filled incredibly quick. And now they have a big Superflex big board up right now, which is a really interesting new way to do best ball on this scale. So I know you're a big Superflex proponent. You have been the main Superflex advocate or one of them in the industry. So I know you probably snuck a few into that, but I'm about 15 deep in the Superflex one right now and probably like 30 to 40 deep in the single QB one.
So with the Superflex contest that they're running right now, though, isn't that like you only draft 4 players or something like that?
No. That's this one is like you've obviously done like their Best Ball Mania, their big contests like that. Now, what this Superflex one they did is it's the same roster construction, except they took away 1 receiver, so you only have to start 2 receivers, 2 running backs, a flex, and a Superflex. So it runs a lot like your typical Superflex home league as far as roster construction, and it's half point PPR.
Yeah, I wonder why they turned the 3rd receiver into a Superflex. Maybe it's just easier for like their algorithms or something.
That's what I'm thinking. I assumed at first they just added a Superflex for the first draft I did, and that I would recommend anybody before you enter a contest to take the time to read the rules and don't assume anything. Because that first draft I did, I assumed that it was still 3 receiver and they just added a Superflex position. They're 20-round drafts, but they actually took a receiver away. So it does make a difference, like how many you're going to draft and how you want to construct your rosters.
Yeah, it's funny you say read the rules because we think of that as like, of course you're going to read the rules. But I had Peter Shanky, RotoWire president and founder, on this podcast doing a baseball, like 3 mistakes that drafters always make. And he said, I'm going to start off by just telling you, most people don't read the rules and you need to read the rules. And he was talking about it in terms of baseball, but you just made it just perfectly sense. A contest changes. Oh my God, all the Superflex maniacs get excited, but they don't realize wide receiver. Not only did they increase the value and turn up the volume on quarterback, they turned down the volume on receiver, which again, I understand maybe why they did it. It just seems a little counter, like the whole idea was to raise quarterback up to balance it with the other positions, not to pull the volume down. So, but that's a debate. I mean, you and I play in a ton of these leagues where there's like 3 receivers, 2 flex, a super flex, sometimes multiple tight ends. So
yeah. And if you don't know exactly what the rules are, what the scoring is, what, you're just going to construct rosters that aren't plus EV. And I like doing these drafts, especially this time of year where people are just kind of getting a feel for it. You see there's probably 3 or 4 teams out of the 12 you draft with that are essentially drawing dead right from the start just because they mangled how bad they constructed their rosters. Best Ball is a relatively new game compared to Dynasty, compared to DFS, what we're doing. So it's not like it's figured out. It's not like there's an ideal roster construction, but there is roster constructions that are going to really hamper you if you're not paying attention to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, often time, and there is definite strategy. We had Josh Larkey on last week talking about best ball strategy, and I love the way guys like him, guys like you think about it. It's when you're doing multiple hundred permutations, you get a chance to see like what works. And I guess really that's one of my questions for you. Like, what's your edge in those games? Why are you doing such high volume? You must feel like you have an edge, or I mean, obviously everyone loves drafting, but why so many?
I do. I think this, for me, especially if you're going to be drafting this time of year, like obviously we don't know where Drake London's going to be on. We don't know. Up until a couple days ago, we didn't know where Desean Watson was going to be the quarterback, and we still don't know where Baker Mayfield is going to be playing. What you want to do is, I think, be able to get guys at a value that they're not going to be available in September and build a portfolio. Now, I'm kind of kicking myself for not doing this. I honestly believe Brady was retired. Like, I thought that Tom Brady, like, why go through the whole rigmarole, like, announce it, like, have Adam Schefter break the story, then you announce it yourself just to come back 2 months later. So there were people in this Superflex big tournament on Underdog that were drafting Brady in the 15th round and doing that for weeks. And every draft I kind of looked at him like, oh, I don't know about that. Giving up a roster spot is a pretty pricey, sacrifice. But now Brady goes in the late first round, middle first round, sometimes like early second at the absolute latest. And there's like thousands of people that have him at a 15th round value, which is incredibly valuable. So you got to be willing to take those risks to gain like plus EV rosters. And that's why I like being able to I think I can speculate that. Obviously I missed on the Brady one. You're not going to be 100% on everything, but I like getting involved now and kind of reacting to news in ways, things that I see might be overstated or might be understated. Like last year, when a prime example of this for me, I was way overweight on Jamar Chase just because there was that whole 2-week period where the beat writers were writing these stories because they got to produce content. They're doing their job. He's dropping the ball at practice. But I'm like, this guy won the Biletnikoff Award at 19 years old. He's going to one of the best young quarterbacks in the league who was his college quarterback. He knows how to catch, but he was legitimately dropping 2 rounds in ADP. So you were getting him in the 6th, occasionally the 7th round. So I was just buying that dip nonstop.
Yeah, you said something interesting there, and it's about leaning into the uncertainty. Some people don't, why? You always hear that all the time, and, we experience that in some of our home league drafts, Chris, where, everyone's like, well, why are we going to draft in June or July? It's like, all these injuries can happen, but it's leaning into that uncertainty that actually creates the edge for the experienced fantasy players. So when you're playing in your casual leagues, the more uncertainty, the more edge you have, the more information that's solidified, the more the casual players have, the edge balances back out. And specifically in best ball, I like what you said there. It's almost like if you're in a big board contest at this point, you cannot draft Tom Brady. You can't take him in the first round because somebody else already has him in the 15th round. So you just have to hope that, or, your edge would be if Brady fails or if Brady he hits the Peyton Manning cliff. Because if you're taking him in the first round and someone else has him in 15, and then, you're wasting essentially a first round pick, it basically puts him off the radar in those contests, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because if you're using a first round pick on Tom Brady, someone else is, coupling is taking Jonathan Taylor in that same spot, whereas the running back that you took in the 15th round is Pierre Strong, and you don't even know if he's going to be on a roster. Like, just the 2v2 there is just, you're incredibly disadvantaged. But that's the beautiful thing about, starting drafting in March. Underdog's going to keep releasing new contests every few weeks, every few months. They haven't even, started their biggest ones yet. And DraftKings hasn't even put out their, started their best ball product. I'm sure there's going to be some other big sites that are going to be diving more heavily into the best ball streets this year. So there's always opportunity if you think you missed the wave to get back on and get them at a fair value relative to where everybody else is playing.
Yeah, I'm here talking with Chris Felicetta writes for DFS Army, some of my favorite off-season best ball articles. And Chris, where else? You've written in a couple other spots before too for some other fantasy sites. What was the other spot that you did some articles for?
I did some blogs for Roto Grinders before I started writing consistently for DFS Army. I actually covered the Yankees for SB Nation like a few years back, and I've just been kind of playing fantasy, as you know, for decades now at this point, without trying to age myself. But this is really a best ball is where I've kind of found my link, and I love Dynasty too. Obviously, I don't do it like I can't manage as many leagues as you do, and I don't know how you do it with the waivers and everything. It's just, it amazes me the kind of I guess just organization that takes to be able to manage that many leagues. If you came into the back room where the kitchen, the food's being made, you would see it's not that organized. But the reason that I have Chris on the podcast, because he is a master of strategy in my judgment, and we're gonna talk some dynasty strategy in a minute. We're gonna also talk about some players when you're drafting in startups that we both don't like. We think are landmines, we think are busts.
And we'll have some debate about that. I'm sure we'll agree on some, disagree on other. But either way, I love talking about that because it opens up avenue for discussion. But as always, the RotoWire Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast is brought to you by WynnBET. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor of RotoWire's Fantasy Podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action, user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, and all the digital casino stuff that you could imagine. WynnBET is currently available in 9 states, rapidly expanding. That's WynnBET, WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner of RotoWire's Fantasy Podcast. Make a qualifying deposit today and use code RotoWire, $200 deposit match. Okay, we got that out of the way. So Dynasty, I know what you're saying. Best ball is easier to manage than Dynasty leagues, but when you're in like these large Dynasty leagues, like you and I are, like we were talking about, like 3 receivers, 2 flex. Sure, waivers come up, but it's not as much of a grind once you get midseason because everybody's rostered. Especially, we have 10-man taxi squads to stash all these year 1 and year 2 players. But I also think that what's becoming popular now is Dynasty Best Ball. I'm in a few of those, which kind of makes it a little bit easier, but obviously it changes the strategy. All right, let's for the next let's get a player discussion started on some bust players. So this is Dynasty startup season. Everyone's in their drafts. A couple different ways people are doing it is they take the rookie picks out and then they have like a reverse order rookie draft similar to what we did in our big Dynasty league. Or what I like now is in a Dynasty startup drafts, they put the kickers in there as placeholders. And what you do is you draft kickers as picks. So the first kicker drafted would be the pick 101. The second kicker draft is 102. So you're not necessarily drafting Malik Willis and then he gets hurt and then you're out of luck, but you're just drafting the pick within the veteran pool, and that acts as like an insulated pick. So I think that's a more fair way to do it in startups.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to do it. I've never played that until you showed me the draft you did recently just for some perspective, but I thought that was really interesting.
It's a better way to do it because drafting 101, who we think Breece Hall being 101 today, that could totally change by the time we get some quarterback that shoots up the board that we don't know. Baker Mayfield was not the 101 in his draft year at this time last year. I mean, no. His year.
No, of course not. And like, I think Willis is going to go higher than people expect. I think somebody is going to, I think he's going to be in the top 5 every year. Someone talks themselves into a quarterback or 2. Like, even look at like Goff and Wentz that year. Nobody thought they were elite, top prospects. Baker Mayfield before his senior year was thought to be like a 6th round pick. Burrow was thought to be like a 6th round pick before he had his legendary senior year at LSU. So, and I think those guys are better than what we're seeing this year. But Willis certainly has all the tools. Like, there's nothing that kid lacks as far as arm strength, mobility, like size, like what. Someone's going to talk themselves into that potential. I
don't even think they need to talk themselves into it. We were talking yesterday. I was on the Flex Network pod with those guys, and there's been Mike Tomlin has made no bones about it that he is interested in Malik Willis. They're going to probably have to come up into the top 5, like you just said, to beat Carolina, who has the 6th pick, to take him. And Mitch Trubisky, the reason they signed Mitch Trubisky for such a cheap contract is to set the offense up with a mobile quarterback, let Mitch take all the crash test dummy hits, and then insert Willis once they feel the offensive line is up to par. Or if Willis shows out in practice, put him in right away. But Mitch Trubisky and Willis, obviously, it's a similar style quarterback. Poor man's, very rich man's. But you can't just throw a Mason Rudolph, pocket passer in there and then insert Willis into the offense. So I think that Pittsburgh is going to do everything they can to do what you just said and get up into the top 5. All right, let's talk some Dynasty busts. Who's the first guy that you put on your list that Dynasty drafters should not take in their startup drafts?
Okay, see, I'm coming today with 3 guys that are all dudes that I think are excellent players. So I'm not going to come in here and say,
this is all at ADP, by the way.
Yes,
we're ADP.
This is all relative to ADP because I think you've said this a bunch of times. Like, I'll draft anybody if the price is right. But like, I think it's easy to come in here and mention like a 32-year-old receiver or a running back that's just coming off like 1,200 carries over 3 years. But I want to go with some guys that are going to like piss some people off a little bit. Dudes that I actually think are really good players, but I just don't like them at their ADP. And the first one that I'm going to bring up. Our discussion about Pittsburgh kind of leads into this. I think Deonte Johnson is going entirely too high based on assumptions and statistics that we saw him put up with Ben Roethlisberger, just peppering him with targets and using him as a security blanket. Like, I don't think that we know that he is going to see that kind of volume from Mitch Trubisky.
Okay, right now, wide receiver 9 in Dynasty startup drafts.
Yeah, he's going like an entire 4 or 5 rounds ahead of Chase Claypool. Now, I think Claypool is a comparable talent to Deonte Johnson. And if we were drafting in a vacuum and, I would take Johnson first. But like I just looked at that Dynasty startup that you sent me, you're getting so much value with Claypool. And last year, Roethlisberger was a corpse. He couldn't move around in the pocket long enough to be able to throw the ball down the field. He literally didn't have the arm strength to do it anymore. And I heard an interesting stat. I think it was Jake Seeley, maybe on the Pat Mayo podcast, talked about how over the last 3 years, Ben's average depth of target was significantly less than what Mitch Trubisky's is for his career. So we don't know that Trubisky is going to just feed targets to Johnson like Roethlisberger did. Like he might develop a rapport with Claypool. And this is the type of thing where we're drafting all season, like someone like me and you who are savages. I'm going to do hundreds of best balls. You're going to do countless Dynasty startups, but we're going to pay it. And you have to be willing to change these opinions. You have to be willing to incorporate new information. But as of right now, I am much preferring the 4 to 5 round discount on Claypool based on what I think is assumptions that we don't know to be true with Trubisky, or God forbid they do take Willis like you suppose. We've seen that guy throw 60-yard beautiful dimes. Like him and Claypool would be a gorgeous combination, I think, in the chance that happens. So at this point, at cost, I'm a fade on Deonte Johnson.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. And like you said, when a new quarterback comes in, the uncertainty of who their connections going to be. We all knew Cooper Kupp was great, but when Matthew Stafford came in, it just really elevated him to that elite echelon. Right now, okay, so I still have my old Deonte Johnson ranking here. I have him at 9 on the RotoWire Dynasty Superflex wide receiver rankings. They're available free right now. For just go to rotowire.com/try, get RotoWire 10 days. But I agree, he's got to move down. So I'm just going to give you a couple of the names. We're going to do this live on air. This is why we have these discussions, because I have him right where the consensus is. I had moved him up, and now rational thought has come in. And I think
if you have it in front of you, out of curiosity, who are the next 2 or 3 receivers in your Dynasty rankings after Deonte Johnson?
Okay, right, so this is who I have after. That's basically what we're going to do. I'm going to read you the next 5 names, and then Stephon Diggs or Deonte Johnson.
I'm taking Diggs right now for sure.
28-year-old Diggs, 25-year-old Deonte Johnson, right?
But I'm using your own logic on you here that I played Dynasty for 3 years. I think if you try to project anything past that, you're giving yourself too much credit as a projector to Nostradamus. I'm trying to win money for 3 years. And for the next 3 years, I want Steph Diggs over Deonte Johnson.
29-year-old Devontae Adams, who's with Derek Carr.
I think he takes a little of a hit moving from Rodgers to Carr, but I would still looking at a 3-year window, I want Adams.
Okay. T. Higgins, 23 years old, to Deonte Johnson.
I really like T. I love the Cincinnati offense.
Okay.
That's a really close one right there. That's a pivot point because I think he is. I'm a big Chase guy. Like in our Dynasty startup that ran the Madden Curse League, I took Pitts in with the 2 overall in the rookie draft last year. It's tight end premium over Chase, and I still kind of think I maybe screwed that one up.
Would you reverse it right now if you could? If someone offered you Chase straight up for Pitts in a premium, you would pull the trigger, or you're not sure?
I'd have to think. I'd think long and hard about it. I'd dig into it. Like obviously, 1 year out, I completely am on the wrong side of that. But I do think obviously we have not seen the best of Pitts yet. He had 1 touchdown.
Yeah, I just took him 6 overall in a double PPR tight end league, single start, but double PPR. So I'm with you that, yeah, the early returns are favor chase, but in any sort of premium league, you have to consider it the other way. All right, let's just finish this exercise because I think you brought up a really good point here. And this is how, everyone thinks that like everyone's got their own special algorithm, how they do rankings. You know what my rankings are? My ranking, I'm a curator. I don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself a curator of information. I take everyone's information in. I have my process. I trust my observations, but I like talking to sharp people like yourself and then figuring out where I fall in there. And then I basically put up my cheat sheet, my rankings on RotoWire, how I would draft. So, but
exactly.
every Sunday I smooth it out.
Do it.
Yeah. And then if anyone has questions, I can answer them logically. Let's see. Okay. So how about, here's a good one. We unknown quarterback right now with DK Metcalf, 24 years old, or Deonte Johnson, 25 years old. And I know these are so close, but
these are really close. But like I'm making these decisions every day, like and I know it's not Dynasty, it's redraft essentially in Bestball, but like I've been taking DK over Deonte.
Yeah, just the talent, the big playability, right?
I think he's just a special talent, and I think whoever. I don't think it's going to be Drew Lock. Do you? Like maybe
I do think it's going to be Drew Lock, mostly because even if they draft like a Kenny Pickett at number 9, what they want to do is, you're right. If they're going to probably want to get Kenny Pickett on the field, but the first 4 games of the season are probably going to be Drew Lock games.
But Drew Lock's not shy with the ball. He'll throw it downfield to DK. Like I don't think you're going to feel like you have to, sit. Not that you're going to sit DK if you drafted him where you drafted him, but I think you're going to put him out there pretty confidently, even with Lock. And there's going to be some, inaccurate passes, and it's not going to be smooth. But I think there will be numbers there.
Yeah, DK is a big corrector of inaccurate passes. He can go up and get it. I like that. All right, so you like him, not as wide receiver 9, but you would be more comfortable wide receiver 12, 13, it sounds like, for Deonte Johnson. And you might say, oh, what's the difference between 12 and 9? It's like a round and a half.
Which is, a round and a half is a big difference. It doesn't sound like it right now, but when you're actually like doing these drafts, it's all the difference.
Well, the higher up in the draft, the more towards the start of the draft you are, the smaller the gap is equivalent to a bigger gap later on. So the difference between pick 1 and pick 10 is just as big a gap as it is between rounds 12 and 17. Exactly. That 5-round gap means almost less than the players that you're picking between pick 1 and pick 10 just in itself. So because the magnitude of their impact comes down. Obviously, you can hit on sleepers, but there's players that you would take in round 12 that if you took them in round 17, it wouldn't matter either, and vice versa. If there was players that you took in the last round of your best ball, you could easily take those guys in the 12, 13 range. All right. My first bust is a little more obvious, and it's, I guess I thought I was getting ahead of it a little here, but I'm going to tell you Alvin Kamara, but I'm in a startup right now that's going on. We're in the 7th round. It's a super flex, and he's still not off the board. Wow. So that tells you that the early Dynasty drafters are not on him either. He's the next one in the queue, so he's going to go in this round. Yeah, yep. But, and again, in a super flex and a double tight end premium, also with rookies in here, here's a couple of the names that have gone off the board before Alvin Kamara, okay? And by the way, this is a sample of one. We're going to talk about his ADP in a minute. Elijah Mitchell just went off. David Montgomery, Josh Jacobs, Travis Etienne, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, who's 29, all went off the board before 26, 27-year-old Alvin Kamara. Does that make sense to you? Why do you think, first of all, do you agree that Alvin Kamara is a landmine in Dynasty right now?
I honestly didn't realize he was going that late in the 7th round.
Of a super flex. So it's like the 4th round. So it's like the 4th round of a.
Like I honestly haven't been getting a lot of Kamara in the drafts I'm doing so far. So I do agree. I clearly the proof would be that I agree with you to some extent. I think a lot of people are scared off of what the New Orleans offense is going to be right now. Like I think it kind of the rumors are leading you to believe that it's going to be Jameis back there. And obviously we've seen a fall off from when Jameis was the quarterback in Kamara's production. And he has a ton of wear on the tires at this point. And I like to draft guys, whether it's in Dynasty or Best Ball. I want to tell myself that I'm going to get their best season. Like, am I going to get Alvin Kamara's best season if you draft him right now? Is that a realistic expectation, do you think? I don't think so. I think he's had his best season. So I don't think you're crazy with that one.
All right. Well, when you talk about like their best season, and this leads us into, I've been the Zeke truther this offseason, and he's obviously not on my bust list. I'm advocating to taking him. He's the player I'm going to be profiling in the Player Profiler Roto Underworld draft kit this year, and I'm finalizing that video for those guys. Even if you don't get their best season, I guess if the ADP is not the first round, is he going in the first round of underdog? I'm talking about Alvin Kamara again. Is he going in the first round?
No, I think he's more of like a third round pick at this point. Or in the Superflex, I think he's more like a fifth round pick.
Right, which lines up with what I'm saying here. Okay,
yeah.
so maybe. And also a suspension could be looming for him too, which redrafters, you can't draft Alvin Kamara that early if it's going to be a 4-game suspension, for his bar fight in Vegas.
No.
Because then you're getting 0-0-0-0 for the first 4 weeks.
That kills you, especially if you're if you draft him in the third round of a redraft and he misses 4 weeks, you're coming in a real big hole there.
Yeah. All right. So it sounds like that he is kryptonite for a lot of drafters. If he falls this far, like if he lands on my pick right now in the 7th round, I'm probably going to take him. But that again goes into what we said originally, that we don't hate players, we hate ADPs.
We hate ADP. Right. Like I'm not as high on Zeke as you are, but I find myself getting Zeke because he's really falling. Like everybody hates him. Like people think he's washed. People think Pollard is better, but I see Zeke like in the single quarterback big tournaments last to the late 5th round, like at pick like 5-10, like I think the volume and the role and the touchdowns are going to be there, that even if you don't think you're getting Zeke's best season, like I said before, he's a valuable player at that ADP, especially because if you're looking to take a running back there, that means you probably went Chase, you probably went Jefferson, maybe you went early and got Lamar or Mahomes or something at QB, or took an early tight end like Kelsey or someone. So now it's like, okay, I could plug this guy in. He's, other than suspensions, he's healthy generally, and like he might not be like 100%, but he gets out there and plays, and he'll scum you a couple touchdowns like here and there. So I think it's like at that like late 5th round, like I don't think there's a ton of like risk to Zeke there. As
of yesterday, in 1 QB, Zeke's ADP was 46, so it's like late 4th. But you're saying in Superflex it pops a little later.
No, it pops later. Like I think that's ADP, but like I've seen him last. Like I've taken him in like the underdog single QB best ball late 5th round. You can get him in.
Well, maybe because it's ADP, so it's average draft position. So maybe he's going in the 5th round, and I'm the one pushing the ADP up by taking him in the damn 3rd round every time.
I would say do not take him because you don't need to. Like, I think it's different. Like, it's different for everybody. Like, if you're a volume drafter like I am, like you see some of these guys like Eagles, and these guys do 150 in every contest. I don't know how they find the time to do it. Like, to get the volume I get down is pretty time consuming. But like if I'm going to do 100 drafts in the Best Ball Mania, I'm never going to take Zeke in the 3rd round because I know there's going to be 10% of those drafts or 15% of those drafts where I could take him in the 5th round, and that's when I'm going to take him. Like I'm going to get my exposure to Zeke there, and I'll have some exposure to Zeke, but I'm never going to reach for him because I know that that's the advantage of drafting a lot and drafting once a day and for months at a time, that you get a feel for that kind of stuff. It's like I don't have to reach here for Zeke even if I like him more than most, because I know I'm going to be able to get him at a better price tomorrow or the next day.
In Dynasty, who are you taking there of those two? Just say you're on the clock. It's the, whatever round that those guys are going in, Kamara or Zeke in Dynasty right now, both age 27.
I'm taking Kamara today. I know that might disappoint you a little bit, but I don't think there's a Pollard to Kamara's, in Kamara's backfield that can steal carries from him the way Pollard could steal them from Zeke. So
that's fair enough. And then obviously you could have the counter argument at the quarterback, but for another day. All right.
And that could totally change too. Like if they draft like Kenny Walker or something, then all of a sudden I might be taking Zeke out of him. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Who's your second Dynasty bust? Who's a player that you're telling people don't trade for this guy, don't draft him in your startup drafts?
This is another one that I think is an excellent player, and who's young in his prime. But I think Antonio Gibson's going entirely too high now, especially with McKissick back in the fold. Like, I think that takes the ceiling away. Like, I don't think he has – if McKissick's in that backfield, they're going to use him. They're going to use him on 3rd downs. They're going to use him on, the 2-minute drill. I think that takes away the ceiling of Gibson being a top 5 running back. I know our buddy Brandon Adams is going to hate to hear that because he's the biggest McKissick truther. The biggest Gibson truther there is. But in that Dynasty startup you sent me, Gibson went in the second round ahead of a lot of backs that I would have taken over him. He went
like who were the backs that you would have taken that he went, and then who are some of the guys that went after that you prefer?
I mean, this one, I might still take Gibson in a vacuum if they were going in the same round where I think they should be in like the third or fourth, but he went 6 rounds ahead of Michael Carter, which I think is insane to me. Like the 2v2 of like the receiver you're going to get in the second round where Gibson went to pair with Michael Carter in the 8th round compared to the receiver you're going to get in the 8th round to pair with Gibson. Like I'll take that Carter and like say Jefferson 2v2 every day. Like I think Carter is being undervalued there by a good 2 to 3 rounds. And I mean, you're a Jet guy. What do you think that Carter is being slept on?
I don't. I'm in the minority. So everyone I talk to agrees with you that Michael Carter is this great value, good player, and I think he's a good player. But it's I was taking a look at the second round real NFL draft board, and I see the Jets have 2 early picks in the second round. I think that if any of the if Kenneth Walker or if Breece Hall are there, they're going to take one of those guys, and that obviously changes the outlook because I think they have. Let's pull it up right now. Let's see, second round NFL draft. So, and again, this is projecting because we can only look at what we have right now, right? Okay, in the second, let's see, I hit the wrong link. But yeah, so if they do take a running back, because they have the 2 picks in the first round, right?
Yep.
And they have 2 early picks in the second round. Let's get, okay, the draft order for round 2. Jets have pick 34. And they have pick, well, they got something that I'd have to look for it. All right. I don't want to do it.
34 is a prime running back spot. Like that's an area where a running back definitely could go. And I think, I don't know who says it, like you need to have strong opinions loosely held. Like I'm very willing to change that opinion on Carter. Like if they draft Walker, right. I'm higher on Walker. And
here we go. I got it. It's pick 35. So the third pick in the second, and then they also have pick 38, which they got from Carolina in the Sam Darnold trade. So 35 and 38, I would say that there's a good chance they could take one of the running backs, even if it's Isaiah Spiller, who, if his stock could end up going back up. Now, it may not be. And then, okay, you're back in business. But in the 8th round, what you're talking about with Michael Carter, no brainer. Because if they don't take a player, then you've just gotten like a 4th round running back that's a pass catching running back in the 8th round. And if they do take a player, you have a nice complementary piece that's one injury away from having the whole backfield to himself. So Michael Carter's ADP still holds up. So, but I just think
there's a lot of people, obviously a lot of people are kind of thinking on the same line you are, because Carter goes significantly later in best balls and in Dynasty, everything I'm seeing. So I think there's definitely a lot of skepticism and fear that they might draft a running back out there that's depressing his ADP right now. So if you believe in him like me, take him now because you're not going to get a better price on him. Like this is the time to buy. This is the time to buy.
Yeah, one of our guys in the chat, Crackshot, said Michael Carter will not be replaced. I don't think that's if the Jets take a running back early in the second round, I don't think that they're thinking of as, hey, let's replace Carter. They're thinking it as something to be a complementary piece. Right. But
that would take away the ceiling. That would, if they had Breece Hall, Isaiah Spiller, Kenny Walker in there, that does kind of remove the ceiling outcome.
Yeah, because I think a lot of mock drafts have the Jets taking a wide receiver at pick 10 or they're one of those early picks. And what's the best way to insulate their investment in Zach Wilson is to put pieces around him. They signed 2 veteran tight ends, and no one likes them for fantasy, CJ Uzomah and Tyler Conklin, but those are professional tight ends to shore up the blocking, to help with the short passing game. Of course, they're getting Corey Davis back. Everyone loves Elijah Moore. If they add a top 10 wide receiver and then an elite running back to complement Michael Carter, then there's no excuses. They can figure out what they have with Zach Wilson. So I think that that's a reasonable concern, given that the Jets have multiple picks in that prime running back. I like how you position that. It's a prime running back area. That's where Jonathan Taylor went. Yep. That's more or less where Clyde Edwards-Helaire went.
This kind of leads me to one player I wanted to ask you about too, because going into this draft season, 3 guys that I kind of thought I was going to be able to get at a bit of a value, and the market just loves that. Like Trey Lance, who obviously killed everybody's best ball teams last year, but there is no discount on him where he's going. Pitts, who was underperformed relative to what you expected and where you drafted him. He was going pretty much where Cooper Kupp went, and he got 1 touchdown. And the one that I want to ask you about is Elijah Moore, who I love talent-wise, but he missed time. Zach Wilson missed time. He didn't put up great numbers. And he's going in the 4th round. Like, he's going very high. Like, no one is holding anything against him. And I thought I'd be able to get him about a bit of a discount this season, but not at all. Like,
yeah, no, you nailed it right there. Is that Elijah Moore is not on any of my best ball teams or my dynasty teams where I didn't take him in the rookie draft. He's not in my startups. I love him. I really, but he is just going. Someone always likes him more than me. My new dynasty philosophy. When I say new, it's like over the last decade of playing dynasty, you evolve, and I'm not going to fight people in the room for someone. I'm not going to be, I don't have like my guy. I have my guys that people hate. We talked about Zeke earlier. Mike Evans falls into that category now, where he goes into the 3rd round of redraft, but like the 7th or 8th round of dynasty startups because of his age. Yeah, dynasty players are ages. So you're talking about really Elijah Moore, and we elevate dynasty players as a whole. We elevate youth, and sometimes to a fault. Now, Elijah Moore, you hit it on the head. Would love to have him, but there's always someone in the room that likes him better than I do. He's on 0 of my startups. The only place I have him was where I was lucky enough to, had pick 110 or 2-2 in my rookie drafts last year, and I was able to get him. So
now, if they draft like a Drake London or a Garrett Wilson, guys that like you've seen mock to them with their like 2nd, 1st round pick there, do you think that hurts Elijah Moore? Do you think that kind of like, or takes double coverages away from him? What do you think? Or is that a knock him down?
I think that those guys don't do what Elijah Moore does, so it allows him to operate in the field. Elijah Moore's dynasty value and redraft value is not going to depend on another rookie coming in. It's going to depend on the development of Zach Wilson. And we saw enough from Elijah Moore to get excited about him that when he was healthy and when he's on the field, and I think he had his big game with Mike White, though, didn't he?
I think he did, yeah.
Yeah. So
Mike White looked kind of good there for a week or two.
Yeah.
I heard they brought him and Flacco back, which I thought was kind of weird. Like,
yeah. Well, Flacco is almost making no money. The Jets
he's like a coach on the field, right? Essentially,
more or less. Yes. Yeah. The reports were that Joe Flacco does some of the ass kicking in the locker room that the coaches can't do nowadays. So
okay, that makes sense.
He's basically a high paid coach, but can get in there just in case things fall apart again.
And one other quick thing on the Jets receiving core there. Like, I was talking to our buddy Johnny Bomber, who's a big Jet fan, fantasy player for a million years. And he doesn't really look at ADP or start drafting until after the NFL draft. And he was shocked to hear that Elijah Moore was going like 8-9 rounds ahead of Corey Davis. Like, you could get Corey Davis in like the 12th, 13th round who drafts, and Elijah Moore never gets out of the 4th. Do you find that gap to be that's a value?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that Corey Davis is a perennial disappointment for fantasy. Being week 1 last year, he exploded. Everyone's like, it was so obvious. Why didn't I take Corey Davis in the 8th, 9th round? And then he did what Corey Davis does. He got injured, production problems after that. So I think the gap is warranted, but sure. So our friend Johnny Bomber, like you just brought up, brings up the best point in Dynasty and in redraft and best ball is when there's really in a vacuum, no difference when the gap is unexplainable. You always want to take the later guy. You brought it up with Deonte Johnson and Claypool.
Yeah, Claypool.
Right. Because as much as we want,
shocked if Claypool had more fantasy points than Deonte Johnson this year. You wouldn't project it. You wouldn't predict it per se, but I don't think it would shock you.
Yeah. And the same thing goes for on the top of the draft with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Now, of course, you're going to take Jamar Chase first, but there's going to be 2, 3, 4 week stretches where T. Higgins is the preferred receiver. Of course, right. Yeah. So, and it may on a seasonal basis not be that way, or, Higgins might be the 16-point guy where Chase gets 8 points. And we all know Jamar Chase can give you that 40 or 50-point mega throbber on any week. And that's why we like him, for his explosive upside. So all those points that you just asked me about, I think are really smart to just ask yourself. You don't always, sometimes it's okay to get excited and reach up for a player like you're doing, hundreds of best balls. just you have to lean into Elijah Moore a little bit, because what if the market's right? Even if fading the market's good, but you do want to get a couple of shares there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. It also leads to what I hate saying this because I do like the player, but my next dynasty bust based on where he's been going is Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I really like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I know I was taking him high, but when you think about this, is that sometimes you can't just go with the generalizations. He was a 4th-round draft capital guy. Like, the Lions are probably going to get another pass catcher too. They re-signed Josh Reynolds, not someone you're scared of, but the offensive coordinator that they had last year, Ben Johnson, right? Is he going to be calling the plays again? That's what I need to figure out, because I saw a quote from Amon-Ra that says that his spike in production was due to this guy, Ben Johnson, who I admittedly don't know much about, really designing the plays for him, really focusing on him. And we know TJ Hawkinson was out. So
Swift was out.
Yeah. And that's fine. I still think Amon-Ra is a good player, but I worry about, him getting, it's when you're a 1st-round wide receiver in the real NFL draft, you're insulated for a couple of years. When you're a 4th-round guy, you can have these breakouts. And Gabriel Davis is going to be another guy that, we can get into that people are going to be excited about because he had a late season pop.
They're going in a very similar range. Amon-Ra goes a little before Gabriel Davis. But
I'm a little worried about Amon-Ra based on his startup ADP, and I like him. But just every time I'm thinking about him, somebody jumps me ahead of him. Again, how can you take Amon-Ra St. Brown ahead of Mike Evans in any format? You're talking about a Hall of Fame, walk-in Hall of Fame wide receiver, usually good for double-digit touchdowns or 1,000 yards in a season. Amon-Ra St. Brown's explosive. So based on my argument, talk about him a little bit.
Well, in our Madden Curse Dynasty League that you run, the Amon-Ra owner, I forget who it was. Actually,
I think it's DK.
It might be DK. That sounds right. He offered me Amon-Ra a couple weeks ago for my 23-1. And I thought about it. I thought long and hard about it, but I turned it down because I don't know where.
So you would rather have the 23-1 than Amon-Ra? Okay.
I did. I made that decision.
I agree with, by the way.
And I love Amon-Ra. I was way overweight him in Bestball. It was one of my best calls last year. I had a ton of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I just thought the role was going to be there. I didn't believe in any of the other receivers that Detroit brought in. I liked him at USC, and I think people underestimate slot receivers, that especially in a full point PPR. I had a ton of him on DraftKings, which is full point PPR. I think people don't realize that underestimate just pure volume that a slot receiver like Amon-Ra could get. You see it every year. 2 years ago, it was Cole Beasley. Last year, it was Hunter Renfrow and Amon-Ra. I think a sneaky one, actually, and I was talking to Bomber about this yesterday too. I think Berrios could have some value late where he's going in the 18th, 19th round of a best ball draft. I think he could be a guy. I mean, he's not going to win you the league, but I think he's a guy that if things break right for him and he's playing in the 3 wide receiver sets, he could provide some PPR value for you and plug up bye weeks and hit your lineup 3 or 4 times in the season in a best ball format.
When you're talking about best ball, and we'll sneak back over to the dynasty discussion because I want to get your 3rd dynasty bust in just a second. But you're talking about 18th round. All you want in those spots, in my judgment, is guys that are going to score for you about 3 to 4 times in your season, meaning they're going to make your lineup 4 times. If that happens, you're lucky. And Berrios, I don't know so much in the half PPR, but he's my most owned player in Underdog because earlier in the season, before he re-signed his contract, he was my last pick. He was my pocket pick. I got him anytime you want. I've seen him go a little bit higher now because he signed that contract, and I like that pick tremendously. All right, let's talk about your 3rd dynasty bust. Who's somebody that dynasty startup players should not take at their current ADP?
This is another one. I'm coming all with good players in their primes, but for me, I'm out on Kyler at where he's currently going. I think there's just too much.
Hold on, let me just tell the ADP. He's going 6 overall, QB5.
Yeah, and I've seen him go
QB6.
Yeah, and I've seen him go ahead of guys like Lamar and Herbert, who it's just not that obviously Kyler's a great fantasy player, but I think I'm putting a lot more stock into what I saw in that playoff performance. He completely looked shook. He just gagged to a level that is just concerning. And even like when Lamar had bad playoff performances, he still put up numbers. Like he still was there. And I know the play, I don't want to like barrel down to one game, but there's a lot of stuff going on. He's my size, essentially. He missed significant time the last 2 seasons with nagging injuries. We don't feel confident that he's going to be healthy. Is Kingsbury solid going forward there? They lost Kirk. They haven't really added any significant weapons. Hopkins is another year older and couldn't stay healthy. He's beefing with the organization. If I got to choose, if I'm on the board and I have Herbert, Lamar, or Kyler, I'm not taking Kyler out of those 3. And so that's why I think I'm not going to own a lot of Kyler in Dynasty or Bestball at this point. Like I just rather build my Superflex team around a bigger quarterback, a Burrow, a Herbert, a Lamar, than a Kyler who is having problems with his organization. He's beefing with his general manager, who's sending out weird missives that like emo, notepad missives, you know?
Yeah, I like that call. So in Dynasty Superflex leagues, there's a top 3 tier. It's Mahomes, Herbert, and Josh Allen in some order. I've seen Herbert go as high as 1. That's fine. I have no problem with it. And then Joe Burrow is settled in as the consensus 4. And then the 5th QB off the board here. I'm just looking at this latest startup that I'm in right now. Okay, so Kyler went 5th this one. So then the next tier is the Kyler, Dak, and Lamar Jackson tier. And then you could throw – some people still will elevate Trevor Lawrence in Dynasty just based on his age. Now, I wouldn't do that. I have him full tier below. That's fine.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So what you're saying here is, Kyler, I mean, you would pass on him. Let's say that the Dak and Lamar are off the board and you're in the first round. What you're saying is you'd rather pivot to a position player like a Jamar Chase or whoever your wide receiver is than take Kyler.
I'm going to take a Chase or Jefferson over Kyler. Like, I'm just not getting Kyler there. Like, and granted, he would be my next guy, but before Lawrence, like I would stop. That's the pivot point for me, where like I would still take him over Lawrence, but I'm not going to get him because I'm going to take position player.
Yeah. So okay. So that's the takeaway. That's the actionable takeaway right there, and I like that because sometimes, and as a super flex enthusiast, I'm a quarterback first. Hoard those quarterbacks. They have even more trade value after the draft is over than they do in the startup draft. So, like for an example, take a quarterback their value is depressed. Someone like Carson Wentz, you get him in like the 8th, 9th round of super flex, right? I mean, of these startup drafts. Some, in best ball, it might be a little bit higher, but if someone offered you a first round pick, you almost are not going to take it. Because you need to start a quarterback. You need to have a quarterback just in case your quarterback 1 and 2 get hurt, or he may be your quarterback 2. So that's why I like quarterbacks, because they hold more value after the draft, even though within the draft. But what you said is you're in the first round. You want to get a player that you feel great about. And if you don't feel great about Kyler Murray and the other quarterbacks there, you feel you can get around later, an older player, Derek Carr, a couple rounds later. You are smart right there. That's a good piece of actual advice. Don't feel locked into taking any position. Take the best player available in these dynasty startup drafts. So I like that a lot. As far as like your seasonal ranking, I mean, where would you rank him amongst other quarterbacks? Even if you're going to pivot to position players, I mean, there's obviously a point where you would take him. So we just talked about that top 4, including Burrow.
Yeah.
Who's going to be your 5th quarterback then? Is it going to be Lamar?
It's Lamar for me. I mean, and I know it's a little hypocritical because they're both in kind of the same contract situation where they are not signed long term, and I think they're both ultimately get it done. But Lamar,
one of them has an MVP on their resume.
Exactly, and one of them has been an absolute league winner in fantasy in his MVP year. Like if you had Lamar, you were printing. I traded him to you that year foolishly. You got the better of me, and that for David Johnson, maybe the worst trade in my entire life in my 2 decades of
single quarterback league. David Johnson still had some hope left, so
he was still going like 4th overall. So in context, but it was just a horrible decision. So
and by the way, in that trade, I wanted Baker Mayfield. You forced me to take Lamar. So
so we're both donkeys in that regard. But this one makes us both sound bad, but
you couldn't get out of your own way in that trade.
No. Oh my goodness. It reminds me of when the geek tried to wouldn't take Herbert for Daniel Jones from me in Herbert's rookie year. And I'm still living off that one. We both look not too bright for that one.
Yeah, as we start to finish up here, I got a couple other players I want to ask you about for dynasty purposes. Now,
Sure.
Desean Watson was traded to Cleveland. I love the landing spot for him. I'll get your take on that in a moment. Amari Cooper is starting to move up the boards. I'm already seeing it, and for good reason. But it's reasonable to at least explore the idea that Desean Watson misses 6 or 8 games. And Amari Cooper is not a spring chicken. I mean, what is he going to be 28 when the season starts? You're basically losing half. Let's assume for a second you're losing half of, and if you don't lose any, that's fine. But let's just make the assumption that he gets 8-game suspension. And let's just say that Roger Goodell came down and that's a suspension. Can you still elevate Amari Cooper knowing you're going to have 8 games of Jacoby Brissett?
I tend to be lower on Amari Cooper than market in general, just because.
But it's Watson. That's the thing.
Now with what is it though? Like you said, there's precedence. Zeke was suspended 6 games with no criminal charges, with an incident with 1 female. Roethlisberger was suspended 4 games with no criminal charges and an incident with 1 female. I mean, this is just pure speculation. We're guessing on what Goodell's going to do. Like, none of us are in Goodell's basement in that comfy chair trying to hear what he's planning on doing with suspensions. But in Dynasty, I'm ignoring it because I think you're going to look at we're looking at Dynasty as a 3-year proposition. Like, Watson has this contract now completely guaranteed. I think Cleveland, I'm kind of mixed on the landing spot because I thought, like, when everybody assumed he was going to Atlanta, I'm like, okay, he's going to be firing up to Pitts, indoor in a dome. Arthur Smith, we think, is a good offensive mind. They don't have a receiver yet now with Ridley suspended, but they're probably going to draft one, you would think. But I like Stefanski, and I do think that's a sharp brain trust they have there in Cleveland. And I think they will figure out how to make the most out of Desean. So in Dynasty, I think I like it. In redraft or in Bestball right now, until we have the suspension news, I'm kind of holding off a bit. Yeah. I was drafting him. I got a decent amount of shares of Watson before the whole legal verdict came down, or lack thereof, like lack of indictment, because you were getting him at a really depressed value, like relative to what he's worth now, like relative to where he's going now. So I got some shares, but I think I'm gonna like kind of cool it a little bit until we know whether or not because right now he's being drafted, especially in this Superflex contest. And I think I haven't done any Dynasty since the lack of indictment came down, but he's being drafted like he's missing no time. So you're not getting a value by picking him now. Like if you're going to have volume, whether it's in Dynasty or Bestball, I don't think this is necessarily the time to pick him, because he's going in like the late first, early second of like the Superflex underdog contest. So I don't think he could even move up that much, like a couple spots maybe.
Yeah, I like the landing spot a lot for Watson because, one, Amari Cooper is a professional wide receiver. If he's not top 10, he's top 20, right? He's one of the best 20 receivers in the league easily. I don't think that's a outrageous statement to make. Will Fuller's sitting out there.
That's interesting. I could totally see them signing him. But then again, with him, like, he missed a whole season with the finger last year. Like, who knows with Will Fuller what you're getting.
It just based on the relationship and what we see in the chemistry with Will Fuller. Will Fuller and Desean Watson is when I say league winning, it's week winning. Like Will Fuller, he has the ability to win the week by himself. He has 40-point fantasy point upside at any given week. We know that. And then, Donovan Peoples-Jones has always been a favorite of mine. Flashed these faces last year. Desean Watson's an elevator. He brings the value of all of the other players that he's playing with up, the offensive line. He's never played with a good offensive line. He has a pretty solid offensive line. Two great running backs. Yeah, two good running backs. I really like Desean Watson in this spot, and especially I don't think they're done. And now there's discussion this morning that Jarvis Landry may re-sign there, gives them that really great underneath threat. We saw Njoku get a franchise tag. Still more of a projection, but we like his athleticism. So
I think with Cooper, with Austin Hooper being released, I could see Njoku having a big season relative to where he's being drafted right now.
Yeah, he's moving up though. He's in the tight end 14 range.
But if you love Fuller and if you want to, this is like what we were talking about, like drafting this time of year, you want to like get some values that aren't going to be there. Draft Will Fuller now and pair him with Desean. If you are drafting Desean, because Will Fuller's going right now, his ADP is 124. Like Will Fuller is essentially free. He's going He's going like one spot like ahead of Josh Palmer, who's, you know, the third receiver, who I like, but he's not as talented as Will Fuller.
He doesn't have league winning upside or week winning upside.
No, that Fuller has. And if Fuller signs in Cleveland tomorrow, that ADP is going to jump 30 spots. So if you're not stacking him with Watson, like Fuller, if you're drafting today and you're someone like Alan Seslowsky who thinks that Fuller is going to end up in Cleveland, drafting today, you're going to get a 30 spot discount on where he's going to go tomorrow. You know. Yep. So,
and like I said, it's not, and you just pointed out something nice, is that it's not just about getting the 30 ADP discount. It's about what could that player do? Because if Josh Palmer moves up 15 spots, we just used him as an example as a nice player.
Nice little possession receiver.
Right. But Will Fuller actually can get those 35 fantasy point weeks and happen and really push your scores up.
If you get the ceiling season out of Will Fuller, there's probably only a 10% chance that you get it. If he's healthy, plays 17 games with Desean Watson, he can win your league at the 12th round or wherever he's going right now, 11th round. He can be a league winner. There's not a lot of 12th round guys that have that ceiling outcome in their range of outcomes.
I'm with Chris Felicetta. Where can they find you on Twitter?
Just at my name, at Chris Felicetta. You see it up there on the screen.
And I'll also link it. I'll link it in the video description below. And just tell everyone what you're working on right now in the Bestball space. Because again, I'm a regular reader. Anytime you post something, I wish you would do it more often. Because every time you post something, it's appointment reading for me.
Right now,
tell everyone what you're doing, how often you're doing it, and how they can find it.
Right now, I'm just checking in like every few weeks with some best ball articles, just highlighting ADP moves and stuff. And then once after the draft happens and free agency is totally settled, I think I'm going to do what I did last year on DFS Army, is just do a summer stock report where I go through each division and team by team, just breaking down all the latest camp rumors, you know, talking about stuff like Jamar Chase not being able to catch according to some beat writers and whether or not we believe in stuff like that. Because not everybody's like, you know, as obsessive as we are and grinding it on Twitter every day and up on everything. So just an article like that to like keep you abreast of what the latest ADP's moves are team by team and what the latest like beat reporter intel and stuff like that. And then let you decide, like give you my take on what I think is actionable and like let people decide for themselves if they want to believe that and take those stands.
So we covered a lot today. We covered Dynasty busts. We covered some best ball strategy. And we talked about players that might be a little bit polarizing, that the market is pulling up and that we might be pulling down. So I love talking Dynasty with you, Chris. I really appreciate you doing this, man. And what we're going to do is every Monday we'll be back with a new podcast. And just a couple of notes right here, housekeeping notes, is that you can get our Dynasty and Best Ball rankings for free right now at RotoWire. Just go to rotowire.com/try. You don't have to put in a credit card. Just put in your email and you get all the paywall stuff unlocked for 10 days. Okay. That's you don't have to do anything. And then after 10 days, it just goes away. You don't have to like cancel anything. So if you want some free rankings and all our premium stuff at RotoWire, it's right there up on the screen or in the video description below. Just go to rotowire.com/try. I refresh the Dynasty Superflex rankings every week. It definitely needs a little refresh right now.
You're going to move my guy Deonte Johnson down a couple slots.
Down, way down. Just a couple. And all right, I'm Alan Seslowsky from RotoWire. Every Monday, new Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast. All right, Chris, thanks for doing this. We'll have you back in a few months again, once the best ball season's really underway. And next week, everybody, we have a great show. Dalton Del Don from Yahoo Sports is coming on, and he's going to tell me why Tony Pollard should be ranked above Zeke Elliott. We're going to have that debate.
That is some appointment listening right there, because I know that hits at the heart of you right there.
And I'm actually profiling Zeke. I told you, for the Roto Underworld for Podfather's draft kit. Last year, I did Joe Burrow. Tough take from me last year, telling people not to draft Joe Burrow, but this year, I'm going to make the case to why Zeke at ADP is probably the best value on the board. All right, Chris, thanks for doing this, man. We'll see everybody